The story begins with our protagonist being greeted by a supreme being in a strange, ethereal place. She tells him that he has been summoned to Midgard through an otherworlder's summoning spell, and she introduces herself as Lady Nolan. Then almost immediately she apologizes, explaining that he was accidentally caught in a summoning ritual meant for someone else. The protagonist confusedly points out the contradiction. She just welcomed him yet says his presence here is a mistake. Nolan elaborates, explaining that the otherworlder's summoning system randomly selects individuals from countless worlds. He was excluded from the list of potential targets, but somehow the system picked him anyway. This revelation leaves the protagonist stunned, and Nolan further clarifies that the summoning spell itself is inherently dangerous. The laws of Earth and Midgard differ so drastically that the act of summoning risks destabilizing Midgard entirely. This danger led to the spell being forbidden, yet a reckless nation still went through with it. Nolan noticed the spell's activation and intervened to minimize the damage, but she couldn't stop it entirely, and she managed to bring him to her domain for now. The protagonist asks if others summoned by the spell are in the same place. Nolan shakes her head, explaining that they were the proper targets and were sent to the Holy Sidonia Empire, where the spell originated. He realizes his summoning was purely accidental and asks her to send him back to his world, but Nolan regretfully admits that this is impossible. She explains that she was furious at the summoners for their recklessness, so she patched things up, ensuring they would never be able to use the spell again. Her explanation grows overly technical, so the protagonist gets overwhelmed and asks for a simpler version. So Nolan bluntly tells him that she's made it impossible for him to return to Earth, and even if it were possible, he no longer has a body waiting for him there. We then see that our protagonist is revealed to be nothing more than a soul in the shape of a fluffy furball, leaving him shocked at his lack of a physical body. Nolan apologizes, explaining that the summoning blowback caused this, as he wasn't meant to be a target. He frustratedly tells her that an apology won't fix his predicament and demands to know what will happen to him now, so Nolan urges him to give up on his old life and start anew as a resident of Midgard. He hesitantly asks if this means he'll be sent to the Sidonia Empire like the others, and Nolan admits she could send him there. However, she warns that the Sidonia Empire is a difficult and dangerous place, and as an accidental summon, his treatment there would likely be terrible. This disheartens him, but Nolan reassures him, saying she feels responsible for his situation and intends to help him. She reveals her plan to send him to a different nation, one where he can have a better chance, and promises to give him her blessing as compensation. Confused by her words, he listens as she explains that this situation resembles the premise of video games and anime in Japan, and that shit means that being sent to a fantasy world with opportunities for adventure. She enthusiastically claims it'll be exciting for him, though he feels nothing but anxiety. Ignoring his doubts, Nolan asks him to try opening his status window, and to his surprise, it appears when he thinks about it. The window shows he is now 17 years old, and despite being a 40-year-old salaryman in his previous life, he doesn't have a job listed. So Nolan explains that in this world, the concept of a salaryman doesn't exist. Instead, there are combat jobs like swordsman, mage, knight, thief, and hunter, as well as production jobs such as herbalist, alchemist, blacksmith, and carpenter. And since fighting doesn't interest him, he expresses his desire for a production job. So Nolan obliges and grants him a skill suited for production work, along with a few other useful starter skills to aid him in his new life. She advises him that by utilizing his skills through practice and effort, he will eventually unlock a formal job title. And with that, she sends him to the continent of Asgard to begin his journey. The protagonist then gets teleported to a serene spot by a pond, where he catches a glimpse of his reflection and thinks he looks pretty hot in his new form. Checking the items Nolan gave him, he finds some food, money, and a knife. Opening his status window, he realizes it might be problematic if people find out he has Nolan's blessing. And that thinking makes him discover that he can conceal his skills, so he hides both his blessing and his item box skill. As he continues exploring his abilities, he notices he also has several magic skills. Like any typical otaku, he decides to try them out. He avoids testing fire magic, worried it might accidentally set the area ablaze. Instead, he starts with earth magic, followed by wind and water magic. Watching the spells in action, he feels a rush of excitement, thinking to himself that this truly is a fantasy world. Determined to learn more, he sets out to find a village. While walking, he stumbles upon a piece of wood and uses his appraisal skill to identify it as treant wood. This high-quality material comes from a treant monster and can be used to craft staves, magic items, and spear shafts. Thrilled with the discovery, he uses his blacksmithing skill to shape the wood into a sturdy spear. Observing the rich resources of the area like treant wood, he speculates that the plants might also be unique. And after searching further, he discovers the region is brimming with useful herbs. So he starts gathering as much as he can, but he realizes it won't all fit in his bag, so he stores the excess in his item box, which conveniently has unlimited storage. Suddenly, a girl runs toward him in a panic and hides behind him, and he sees that she's being chased by a massive, ferocious rabbit. He quickly notices how unnaturally large the rabbit is and grabs his spear to defend her. But the girl warns him that the rabbit is carnivorous, making him even more nervous. As the creature leaps at him, he manages to strike it down with his spear, and that shit kills him immediately. Takumi stands in disbelief, amazed that he was able to defeat such a dangerous beast. But this victory earns him a warrior job, even though he doesn't want it. The girl thanks him for saving her, and he asks where she's from. She explains that she's from Board Village and had wandered into the forest while gathering medicinal herbs. He asks if he can accompany her back to the village, and she happily agrees. He feels relieved and smiles, but before they leave, she asks if he isn't going to take the horned rabbit with him and mentions that the rabbit is considered quite a delicacy. He quickly stores the rabbit's corpse in his item box, explaining that while it can't hold living things, storing non-living objects like corpses isn't an issue. The girl is amazed at his item box skill and compliments him, and then introduces herself as Molly, and he responds by introducing himself as Takumi. The scene then shifts to the Holy Sidonia Empire, where the three summoned humans find themselves confused about their situation. A cloaked woman then approaches them, welcoming them to a new world. She explains that they have been summoned to use their powers as heroes to save this realm. However, her cryptic explanation only deepens their confusion. She then introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first empress of the Holy Sidonia Empire, and reveals her face. And her expression exudes the air of someone who might suck your damn soul in some dark alley. Then we see that among the three, a girl named Akane suddenly gains a unique skill called Revelation from Lady Nolan. This skill grants her divine insight, instructing her to trust her instincts as they will guide her to the right decisions. Following her instincts, Akane decides not to trust Elizabeth because everything about her appearance screams dangerous. Back in Board Village, Molly's parents warmly thank Takumi for saving their daughter. Her father introduces himself as Banga the Hunter and her mother as Martha. Takumi asks if it would be alright for him to stay in the village for a while, and they happily agree, mentioning that their village is abundant in herbs and even has a vein of ore nearby, which excites Takumi. Banga then introduces Boban, who stands nearby, as the village blacksmith. Takumi then thanks the villagers for letting him stay, but they inform him there's no inn in the village. But instead they offer to build him a home, which makes him genuinely happy. They show him a plot of land where his house will stand, and Boban gathers the villagers to help with construction. Takumi decides to pitch in as well, using his earth magic to level the ground. The villagers are impressed by his magical skill, but the effort drains a significant amount of his mana. So Banga advises him to conserve his energy and let the rest of them handle the work. Later, Takumi's new home is completed, and he uses his carpentry and blacksmithing skills to craft some basic furniture to make it livable. Feeling settled, he checks his status window and wonders if it's possible to change his warrior job. To his surprise, an option to switch jobs appears, so he excitedly selects alchemist and blacksmith as his main jobs and dives into work. Together with Boban, he collects ores of iron, silver, and copper. He even discovers a rare mana-infused material called magic iron ore, deciding to smelt all of it into ingots. Takumi begins with the iron ore, noting that in this world the process doesn't require a furnace thanks to magic. Using a combination of his alchemy and earth magic, he successfully transforms the raw ore into ingots, but the process consumes a huge amount of mana. But he pushes himself anyway to continue, determined to create as many materials as possible. Later, Molly brings him dinner only to find that he's collapsed from overexertion. When Takumi regains consciousness, he explains that he pushed himself too hard and drained his mana completely. Martha gives him a sharp lecture for being reckless, and Banga hands him a healing potion, which restores his energy. And from that point on, Martha and Molly check on him regularly to ensure he doesn't overdo it again. Takumi diligently continues his alchemy, refining ores into ingots over several days. And along the way, he manages to extract small quantities of precious metals like gold, lead, tungsten, titanium, and tin. Using these materials, he crafts high-quality utensils and tools, and also his relentless effort causes his alchemist and blacksmith levels to soar. Afterward, we see Takumi honing his smithing skills under Boban's guidance, assisting him with fire magic during their work. And together they craft a knife, and Boban proudly declares it his finest creation yet. Takumi's blacksmith level skyrockets to 40, while his alchemist level lags behind at 33, much to his annoyance, as his real goal is to excel as an alchemist. Later, Takumi approaches Banga, asking for some potions so he can try making his own using the herbs he's gathered. Banga agrees, but only has basic potions to offer, which Takumi gladly accepts. Soon we see Takumi brewing potions like a mad scientist or an evil witch in a fantasy story. The process reminds him of his childhood, when he would experiment endlessly. Once his potion is complete, he notices its color is different from Banga's and can feel faint mana radiating from it. He deduces this is due to his use of water prepared with water magic and becomes eager to learn more potion recipes. Not stopping there, we later see Takumi chewing on random poisonous plants on purpose, and when he gets poisoned, he heals himself with his heal spell, a painful but effective method to gain resistance to poison and paralysis while leveling up his light magic skill. He notes that this dangerous method is the quickest way to develop such resistance, though it's far from pleasant, but thanks to this reckless training, he unlocks purification magic. But just as he reflects on his progress, a massive level 25 armored boar appears before him. Armed with his spear and knife, Takumi prepares to defend himself. The boar then charges and Takumi hurls his knife at it, but the blade bounces off harmlessly. He then desperately strikes with his spear, which shatters into countless pieces. Resorting to spells, he casts Rock Ball and Wind Cutter, but neither has any effect. Frustrated and cornered, Takumi scrambles for a plan. But suddenly, he notices movement behind him, and he finds a poison spider lurking nearby. Assuming the worst, he prepares for another fight only to realize the spider is injured. And before he can react, the boar charges again. So Takumi braces for impact, but the spider unexpectedly comes to his aid, blinding the boar and causing it to miss its attack. Though the boar is disoriented, Takumi remains at a loss on how to finish it. But in a flash of inspiration, he uses his alchemical decomposition skill, and the spell dissolves the armored boar from within, defeating it completely. As the boar falls, Takumi gains martial arts and magic combat skills, leaving him in disbelief that his crafting magic saved him. Takumi then checks on the poison spider, noticing it's on the verge of death. Grateful for its help, he thanks the spider, assuming it risked itself to save him. Using his heal spell, he restores the spider's strength and prepares to leave, thinking everything is fine now. However, a notification suddenly pops up, informing him that he can tame the spider. Surprised by the option, he hesitates. When the spider looks at him with its shiny, hopeful 8 eyes, makes it impossible for Takumi to walk away. He asks if it wants to join him, and upon agreeing, he tames it, unlocking a telepathic connection. He then curiously asks if it already has a name, but it doesn't. Noticing the maple leaf-like pattern on its back, he names it Maple. And as soon as the spider accepts the name, it evolves into a killer spider and even its severed leg regenerates. Later, Takumi returns to the village, proudly showing the massive armored boar he defeated. The villagers are stunned, amazed he managed to slay such a formidable beast alone. Molly, however, quickly notices the large spider perched on his back. Alarm spreads among the villagers, but Takumi reassures them, explaining that Maple is a tamed monster. Banga is floored, remarking that taming insect-type monsters is almost unheard of. Not wanting to linger on the subject, Takumi redirects their attention to the boar, suggesting they focus on preparing it for a feast. The villagers are shocked at his generosity in sharing such a valuable catch, but he shrugs it off, happy to share. Soon the entire village gathers for a celebratory feast. While they eat, Banga hands Takumi the boar's fangs and leftover hide, explaining that these items can fetch a good price in a big city. Takumi curiously asks about the nearest city, and Banga tells him it's a place called Bolton. Then we see Maple playing with the village children, endearing herself to the community. Watching the lively scene, Boban remarks that the village has become brighter and more cheerful since Takumi's arrival. Banga agrees, but reflects that Takumi doesn't seem like the type to settle in a small village forever. Meanwhile, in Midgard, Nolan observes Takumi from afar, pleased to see he's thriving. Another supreme being joins her, asking what Nolan expects from the boy. Nolan feigns ignorance, but the supreme being presses, revealing that she gave Takumi a special body, her blessing, and even sent him a full year into the past, before the Holy Sidonia Empire's summoning spell was activated. Nolan dismisses the notion that she has any deeper intentions, but her expression betrays her true thoughts, hinting that she may have a deeper plan for Takumi's future. One morning, Takumi wakes up to find himself tied up in bed, and he immediately knows Maple is behind it. She apologizes, explaining that she's been feeling lonely because Takumi has been so busy lately, and just wanted to get his attention. Realizing he's been neglecting her, Takumi admits that work has been consuming all this time, so he decides to take the day off and spend it with Maple, and this simple gesture makes her ecstatic. Just as the two are getting ready to enjoy their day, Martha walks in with Takumi's lunch and immediately notices the awkward situation. To her, it looks like something strange is going on between Takumi and Maple, but Takumi insists that it's not what she's imagining. Martha takes his explanation at face value, but can't help noticing the silky threads Maple has produced. Intrigued, she gets the idea to harvest as much silk as possible from Maple, seeing it as a golden opportunity. Later that day, Martha proudly shows off a shirt she's made from the spider silk, and the ladies in the village are going wild over its texture and quality. Takumi, surprised by their enthusiasm, learns that spider silk is considered a rare luxury item, usually only affordable to nobles. Martha, sensing a lucrative opportunity, asks Maple if she can produce more fabric. Maple obliges and eagerly squirts out more silk, but the process is time-consuming, so this means that she won't have time to play with Takumi anymore. Though Takumi is a little disappointed as he has been looking forward to spending the day with her, still he knows he has other responsibilities to tackle, so he's not entirely bothered. It's been about a month since Takumi first arrived in the village, and he's starting to plan his next steps. He intends to head to the city to advance his studies in alchemy, but the thought of saying goodbye to the villagers he's grown close to leaves him hesitant. In the meantime, Takumi decides to visit Boban at the forge to continue practicing blacksmithing. Together, they manage to craft a chest plate that fits Takumi perfectly, as well as a pair of sturdy steel-toe boots. Boban, proud of their work, points out that the boots are great for kicking things in a pinch. But Takumi, ever the pacifist, reminds Boban that he has no intention of fighting because he's committed to becoming an alchemist. Just then, Banga shows up, pleased to see that Takumi's armor is finally complete, though there's a hint of sadness in his voice. He knows Takumi can't stay in the village forever if he wants to grow his production business, and heading to the city is the logical next step because it's where Takumi can sell more of his goods, access a reliable supply of materials, and truly thrive. Banga then mentions that a trader from Bolton will be passing through the village in a couple of days, and he's already arranged for Takumi to hitch a ride back with him. While they're sad to see him leave, they understand this is for the best, and they encourage Takumi to start preparing for the journey. Grateful for their support, Takumi thanks them and heads back to his house to begin packing. On the way, he bumps into Martha, who's carrying a bucket of meat. He curiously asks what she's up to, and Martha explains that she's on her way to dispose of the innards from a horned rabbit Banga had caught. Apparently, the innards are the most delicious part of the rabbit, but they're also tricky to process safely. And without proper equipment to remove diseases and parasites, they have no choice but to throw the meat away. Takumi, however, has a better idea, and he bends down and uses his purification magic to cleanse the meat, making it safe to eat. Martha is grateful but also visibly stunned by what she just witnessed. She points out that light magic is incredibly rare in this world, and if people found out Takumi could use it, it would likely attract a lot of unwanted attention. So she advises him to keep this ability a secret when he leaves the village. Acknowledging her warning, Takumi promises to be cautious, but while he's still here, he plans to use every bit of his power to improve the villagers' lives. And over the next couple of days, he gets to work, using earth magic to construct a sturdy brick wall to enhance the village's defenses. For convenience, he builds a water pump and even adds a few other amenities to make life easier. And by the time he's finished, the village looks completely transformed. So when the merchant from Bolton finally arrives, he's so astonished by the improvements that he barely recognizes the place. Banga then steps forward to greet Pepek the trader, and after finalizing a trade deal, Takumi walks up, ready to depart. Pepek, who's already heard a great deal about Takumi from Banga, introduces himself, and everyone confirms if Takumi has everything he needs. Takumi assures them that he hasn't forgotten a thing, but there's one last gesture he wants to make before leaving. He reaches into his bag and hands Banga a potion, and then explains that he already left about 100 similar bottles at Banga's house and urges him to use them in case of emergencies to heal any injuries. Pepek, noticing the potion, asks for a closer look and is stunned by its quality because it's undoubtedly a high-level potion. However, Takumi seems oblivious to just how valuable his creation is. Soon, the rest of the villagers gather to bid Takumi farewell, and Pepek kindly offers to wait until everyone has said their goodbyes. Molly then waves goodbye to Maple, who's cozily sleeping in Takumi's sack, and Martha hands Takumi an outfit made from Maple's silk, a collaborative gift from the village ladies. Touched by their thoughtfulness, Takumi thanks everyone for their kindness, especially considering how short a time he's been in their village. He then steps into the carriage, and the villagers give him an enthusiastic send-off, assuring him that he will always be welcome in their home. As the carriage heads toward Bolton, Pepek comments on how deeply the villagers seem to care for Takumi. Even the others in the carriage remark on the heartfelt farewell, noting that Takumi was more like family to the villagers than a guest, to the degree that the sincerity of the goodbye tugs at Heath's heartstrings. Speaking of which, the blonde man introduces himself as Heath, while the redhead is Real and the gloomy-looking man is Bogar. They explain that they're part of Lion Fang, a C-rank adventurer party currently serving as Pepek's bodyguards. However, they admit there isn't much for them to do in this peaceful region, making the assignment more of a routine journey than a dangerous mission. Real then notices Takumi clutching his bag tightly and curiously asks if something precious is inside. And Takumi casually answers that his pet killer spider Maple is sleeping in there. The group is stunned that Takumi managed to tame a killer spider, prompting Real to ask if he can see it. However, his creepy demeanor makes Maple headbutt him square in the face, and that makes Takumi immediately start apologizing for Maple's behavior, but the others assure him there's no need because Real totally deserved it. Heath even jokes that Maple might develop a fear of all humans after meeting Real, though that's clearly not the case because Maple seems to have taken a liking to Bogart. And as the group continues fawning over Maple, Papek calls Takumi to the front of the carriage to discuss the potion he saw earlier, and he asks if Takumi has any more in stock and expresses interest in buying some. Takumi is open to the idea, but before the conversation can go further, one of the horses suddenly halts, signaling trouble ahead. A horde of goblins has surrounded the carriage, preparing to attack. The group knows this is bad news, but instead of panicking, they seem excited about the chance to finally see some action. They tell Takumi and Papek to stay put while they handle the situation. With roughly 20 goblins in the field, the adventurers step out confident they can take them all. Real then fires arrows from his bow with precision, while Bogar and Heath crush goblins left and right with their mace and axe. The fight is over quickly, and the group begins dissecting the goblins to harvest their magic stones. Maple observes the chaos with interest clearly warming up to Bogar but maintaining her disdain for Real and indifference toward Heath. After the skirmish, everyone piles back into the carriage and the journey continues for another 3 days. When they finally arrive in Bolton, the members of Lion Fang head straight to the Adventurers Guild to report the success of their bodyguard mission. Takumi tags along as he needs to register with the guild if he plans to stay in the city. Ideally, he would have joined the Alchemist Guild, but since Bolton doesn't have one, becoming an adventurer is his only option. The receptionist Hans explains to Takumi that the Adventurer Guild card can serve as his identification. As long as he completes at least one simple quest per month, the card won't expire. With this knowledge, Takumi proceeds to register as an adventurer and introduces Maple as his pet, finalizing all the paperwork. With his registration done, Takumi heads to Papek's trading company to negotiate a deal for his potions. He reveals that he has about 103 potions in stock, each of exceptionally high quality. Papek is impressed and offers 10 silver coins per healing and stamina potion and 50 silver coins per mana potion. Takumi quickly calculates that this deal would net him over 7 million yen in equivalent value. Shocked by the amount, he feels it's too much money, but Papek reassures him that this is fair, adding that Takumi could earn even more if he established a solid reputation as a potion producer. Papek, aware of Takumi's plans to become a producer in the city, advises him to find a home with an attached workshop for efficiency. Takumi realizes he hadn't even thought about housing yet, so to help him out, Papek calls over his assistant Thomas and asks him to show Takumi a suitable property at an affordable price. Then when Takumi finally sees the property, it looks more like a grand mansion than a simple house. Feeling overwhelmed, he doubts he can afford such a luxurious place. Thomas, however, assures him that the mansion is surprisingly affordable and even guarantees that it's ghost-free, eliminating any unnecessary worries. Takumi then notices the spacious workshop attached to the mansion, which makes it incredibly convenient for his work. Realizing the long-term benefits and knowing he has enough funds from the potion deal, Takumi decides to go for it. And after a moment of deliberation, he tells Thomas with newfound confidence that he'll take the mansion. Thomas is delighted to hear Takumi's decision and assures him he'll begin the paperwork immediately. And he tells Takumi he can move in as early as tomorrow. As they walk through the city streets, Takumi catches a foul stench in the air. Noticing Takumi's discomfort, Thomas explains that the unpleasant odor comes from the city sewers. While the wealthy use magical purifiers to clean their sewage, the main city sewers lack this luxury due to the rarity and expense of magical purifiers, which are typically found only in ancient ruins or dungeons. And occasionally priests are hired to manually purify the sewers with magic, but most of the time they remain filthy. The next day, Takumi and Maple settle into their new house, and Takumi immediately starts brainstorming a solution to the sewer issue. He visits Papek's company to acquire some quartz and clay. Using magic, he shapes the materials and combines fire magic with space-time magic to bake them efficiently. The process is exhausting, and after depleting his mana reserves, Takumi has to drink a couple of mana potions to recover. Despite the effort, his work pays off because he successfully creates a modern toilet. Not long after, Takumi hears a loud scream from the living room. Rushing to investigate, he finds Papek completely wrapped in Maple's silk. Takumi gets bewildered and demands to know why Maple did this, and Maple innocently explains that she thought Papek would find it fun. To her credit, the silk is so comforting that it put Papek to sleep, but the sudden swaddling was definitely alarming. Takumi profusely apologizes for Maple's behavior, but Papek reassures him that it's fine, though being swaddled out of nowhere did give him quite a scare, so he asks to use Takumi's restroom because he needs to shake it off. Moments later, Papek emerges from the restroom with wide eyes, demanding to know what the marvel of technology inside is. Takumi casually explains that it's a toilet he invented. He fitted it with a magical purification device which automatically cleans itself after use. Essentially, once someone uses it, the device employs purification magic to break down waste into inorganic materials, which are then flushed away. Papek is amazed, marveling at the ingenuity, but he quickly realizes that creating such a device would require someone with a rare aptitude for light magic. Takumi immediately realizes he may have messed up, remembering Martha's strict warning not to use his light magic openly. Worried about the potential fallout, he pleads with Papek to keep this a secret. Papek, understanding the gravity of the situation, promises not to tell anyone. However, he's absolutely adamant about one thing: he needs those toilets, and he boldly asks if Takumi can make 100 of them. Takumi hesitates, knowing how much effort it took to craft just one. But with Papek's relentless insistence, he reluctantly agrees, but under the condition that Papek supplies the necessary raw materials. Papek gets overjoyed and accepts the deal, but points out that it's unreasonable for Takumi to handle the entire workload himself. So he suggests that Takumi should consider getting a slave. The suggestion shocks Takumi, who's firmly against slavery. Papek, however, reasons that if Takumi wants to keep his abilities under wraps, having a bound-to-secrecy slave is the safest option. Light magic is a massive deal, marking someone as chosen by God, and the Church of Divine Light wouldn't take kindly to commoners gaining access to cheap purification methods via Takumi's toilets. The church, which profits heavily from monopolizing purification magic, would likely try to force Takumi into their fold. But Papek reassures him that he already has a plan to deal with the church, so Takumi doesn't need to worry about them for now. Papek then emphasizes that keeping the church in the dark about his light magic is paramount, which is why hiring a slave might be the safest option. But Takumi remains firmly opposed to slavery, vowing to handle the work alone if necessary. But before they can argue further, Takumi's guild card suddenly begins glowing. He curiously checks it and finds a notification requiring him to complete a verification quest to maintain his adventurer status. Realizing he won't have time to handle the toilet production alone, he reluctantly agrees to Papek's suggestion. Papek then takes Takumi to the Mulan Trading Company, assuring him they are the most ethical slave traders available. Then, while Papek goes to negotiate a good deal with the owner, Takumi steps out into the garden, drawn by its beauty. There he notices a stunning elf girl sitting alone on a terrace, and before he can say anything, she spots him and sharply orders him to leave. The scene then shifts to Takumi meeting Mulan, the owner of a slave trading company. Papek introduces Takumi to her, explaining that he's looking for a slave. However, he adds that Takumi is hesitant about using a slave contract, so Takumi reveals that in his homeland, slavery doesn't exist. Mulan nods in understanding and explains that if Takumi makes a contract with a slave, the slave will indeed be bound to him. However, she assures him that in the kingdom of Barkula, the rights of slaves are protected by law. She then outlines the general rights of slaves, and Takumi sums it up, noting that the owner is obligated to provide food, clothing, and shelter. Additionally, both the owner and the slave are strictly forbidden from causing life-threatening harm to one another, and the slave is prohibited from sharing any personal information about their owner with others. Takumi reflects that this system is different from what he had imagined. Mulan then explains the common types of contracts. Slaves who enter servitude due to debt remain bound until their debt is fully repaid. Criminals can choose contracts as a form of rehabilitation and to earn a livelihood. Prisoners of war may accept contracts to secure a place to live. However, she adds that some people are captured and forced into slavery illegally, a sad reality that occurs all too often. Papek then suggests that a war slave might suit Takumi best since they can only be freed with their master's permission. Mulan asks why, curious about his preference, so Papek explains that Takumi is a producer with exceptional skills that are impossible for others to replicate. Mulan, however, wants to hear the reason directly from Takumi, so he explains that his primary goal is to focus on his work. However, he also has responsibilities, including completing Adventurers Guild quests and managing daily tasks. He also mentions that he needs someone to manage the mansion where he's currently living and handle the housework. Furthermore, Takumi possesses many confidential skills which could draw unwanted attention. Takumi also adds that he often ventures into dangerous areas to gather materials, so it would be ideal to contract someone who could protect him and assist during all that stuff. Hearing Takumi's requirements, Mulan realizes he needs 2 slaves. She summons a girl named Maria, introducing her to Takumi. Mulan then explains that Maria was kidnapped by bandits as a child and has no surviving family. Over the years, she has been trained in reading, writing, calculations, and general housekeeping. She then informs Maria of Takumi's needs, emphasizing that he requires someone to manage his mansion. Takumi then outlines the layout of his mansion, describing the number of rooms, and asks if she can handle it alone. Maria confidently states that she can manage it, and Takumi is relieved to hear this. Noticing his hesitation, Maria asks if something is wrong. Takumi admits that he's surprised someone as cute as her hasn't already been chosen by someone else. Embarrassed by the compliment, Maria blushes. Takumi quickly apologizes, worried that his comment might have been inappropriate, but Maria assures him it's fine, explaining that her skills are limited to general housekeeping. Takumi assures her that housekeeping is all he needs, but Maria hesitates, appearing uneasy. When he asks what's wrong, she shyly clarifies that she won't be sharing his bed. Takumi is surprised and quickly clarifies that such an arrangement isn't what he's looking for. He reassures her that his sole interest is her ability to manage the household. Maria feels relieved and agrees, so Mulan decides to proceed with her contract. Mulan then informs Takumi that she currently doesn't have any war slaves suited for combat. However, Maria mentions someone named Sophia. Mulan immediately tells her to stop speaking out of turn and instructs her to return to her room to gather her belongings. After Maria leaves, Takumi curiously asks who Sophia is, so Mulan explains that Sophia is a war slave, but she has certain problems. Hearing this, Takumi grows intrigued and feels a strong urge not to ignore the situation. He wonders if it's his intuition skill guiding him, but he decides to trust the feeling and asks Mulan if he can meet Sophia. Mulan agrees and leads him to where Sophia is kept. Mulan then explains that Sophia was captured during the war between the Kingdom of Triaria and the Kingdom of Yober 50 years ago. Takumi is stunned by the time frame and asks for more details. So Mulan reveals that Yober was a nation of elves, and for various reasons, Sophia has remained uncontracted ever since. Takumi curiously asks what those reasons are, so Mulan explains that Sophia's left ear has been sliced off and her right hand and left leg have impaired movement. While her impairments don't interfere with daily life, they make combat nearly impossible. Additionally, her elemental magic and sprite magic have been sealed and she is likely under a curse. These significant limitations make her unfit as a main combatant, which is why no one has taken her. Takumi then asks to speak with Sophia alone, so Mulan agrees and steps out of the room. As Takumi examines Sophia more closely, she tells him plainly that she won't be of any use to him. But Takumi checks her stats anyway using his skill, and to his surprise, her stats are incredibly high, though each one has been reduced by 100 points due to her injuries. Her mana is also completely inaccessible because of the curse, but Takumi realizes her potential and thinks that he can heal her injuries and lift the curse. Mulan then returns to the room and asks Takumi what he plans to do. And without hesitation, he tells her he wants to form a contract with Sophia. Sophia, still doubtful, reminds him that she can't fight, but Takumi simply replies that he will fix her. Mulan is skeptical, questioning whether Takumi can actually address the issues that have plagued Sophia for 5 decades. Takumi confidently says he can, and Mulan agrees to let him take Sophia under his care. Sophia remains uncertain and asks if he truly wants her as his slave. Takumi asks if she doesn't want him as her master, but she responds that a slave's wishes don't matter. And with that, Mulan begins the contract process. She casts a spell binding Takumi, Sophia, and Maria into a formal contract. After the contract is sealed, both Sophia and Maria express that they will do their best to serve Takumi. Takumi thanks them and treats them with respect, but Sophia quickly reminds him that they're just slaves and he doesn't need to act so politely. Mulan, observing the interaction, smiles and remarks that they found themselves a good master. Afterward, Takumi arrives at his house, where Maple leaps at him as soon as he opens the door. Startled, Maria and Sophia immediately prepare to fight the killer spider, but Takumi quickly stops them, explaining that Maple is his pet. He then introduces Maple to the two of them and informs Maple that Maria and Sophia will be living with him from now on. Takumi then shows Maria and Sophia to their rooms. Both are surprised to learn they'll have their own separate spaces, hesitant to accept such accommodations. Takumi insists, explaining that the mansion has many unused rooms and it's better to put them to good use. He also informs them that the mansion has a bath they can use anytime. They express gratitude, but suggest he go to the bath first. Takumi hasn't decided on his own bathing schedule, so he encourages them to use it freely, assuring them he's installed a device to keep the water clean constantly. Later, we see Maria and Sophia relaxing in the bath. Maria remarks that she never thought Mulan would let Sophia go, as she had refused to sell her to anyone before, no matter how much money was offered. Maria believes this means Mulan must have truly acknowledged Takumi as a worthy master, and she thinks he seems like a kind person as well. Sophia, however, remains skeptical and points out that when she looked at the contract Mulan prepared, most of the entries regarding Takumi were left blank. She believes you might be hiding something, and if so, there must be special circumstances or a reason why sharing that information could cause trouble, and she admits that she doesn't fully understand what he's thinking. When they leave the bath, they discover that Takumi has already prepared dinner. Maria is devastated, insisting this was supposed to be her job. Takumi reassures her, explaining he just wanted to make things easier for their first day. He promises she can take over the work from tomorrow, and Maria asks if she can at least clean up after dinner, to which he agrees. Then we see Sophia is surprised to see Takumi inviting them to eat at the same table as him. When she asked about it, he explains that he doesn't want them to live separately just because they are serving him. He hopes they'll eat with him, as it would make him happy, and they agree, but with a little bit of hesitation. The next day, Takumi collects his order from Papek, who warns him to handle it with care, so Takumi assures him he understands and heads out. On his way back, Takumi spots a church and decides to visit, and inside he finds a statue of Lady Nolan. Offering a prayer, he thanks her for her blessings and mentions hearing that the Holy Empire of Sidonia controls this country's religion, so he curiously asks why she was badmouthing Sidonia earlier. To his shock, Lady Nolan suddenly appears before him. Takumi gets startled and asks how this is possible, so she explains that his prayer reached her, which allowed her to call him into her presence briefly. Lady Nolan then answers his question, revealing that she has no connection to Sidonia or its Church of Divine Light. She explains there are two major religions in this world: the Church of Creation, which has always worshipped her, and the Church of Divine Light, which was created later. The latter's god doesn't truly exist, but the Holy Empire of Sidonia used aggressive tactics to spread its influence rapidly, opposing the Church of Creation. So Lady Nolan chose not to intervene, viewing it as a petty human conflict. Takumi then realizes this lack of interference allowed Sidonia to activate its summoning spell, bringing someone like him to this world. Lady Nolan apologizes again, acknowledging the unintended consequences of her inaction. She then offers a disclaimer about her blessing. While parts of it are permanent, others are temporary. As Takumi grows, the aspects of the blessing that helped him grow quickly and meet kind people will fade. She simplifies it by saying his tutorial for beginners is nearly over. Soon he will face more significant challenges, including hitting walls in his growth and encountering individuals with ill intentions. Takumi reflects on her words, realizing that many of the kind people he's met so far were likely a result of the blessing. Accepting that he will need to rely more on himself moving forward, he thanks Lady Nolan one last time and exits the church. The story then jumps forward by 1 year into the future, showing the king of Sidonia asking about the progress of the summoned heroes. He is informed that they are currently training with the knights. The king expresses hope that these heroes will become valuable assets, acknowledging the difficulty of summoning them to this world. The minister notes that the heroes were initially reluctant to help, but thanks to Elizabeth's persuasion, they have become more cooperative. The scene then shifts to Akira and Yamato sparring with the knights. The knights mock their poor performance, highlighting how far they still have to go. Yamato then recalls a humiliating memory from his past, when he was defeated by a freshman during a judo match and ridiculed by everyone. Motivated by that memory, he trains with renewed determination, earning the knights grudging respect for his grit. Meanwhile, the knights ask Akane to join in, but she refuses, stating that she's not interested in violence. She then tries to leave, but Elizabeth intercepts her, insisting that this is not about violence but something essential to saving the world. Then Akira steps in dramatically, playing the role of the protective hero, and assures Akane that she doesn't need to worry because he will protect her. Akane, unimpressed, ignores his bravado and thinks to herself that Elizabeth is dangerous. The story then transitions back to the present. At Takumi's house, he stumbles through the door, falling face first onto the floor. Maria and Sophia rush to help him, picking up his belongings. But when Sophia reaches for the bag Takumi had collected from Papek, he hurriedly places it into his magic bag. Sophia notices this and becomes suspicious, thinking he must be hiding something. Takumi then excuses himself and heads straight to his workshop. Sophia follows him discreetly, and inside she watches him immerse a knife into a strange liquid and injure his arm with it. Then he immediately heals himself using magic. He then prepares to repeat the process, muttering that Maria really messed up earlier. She misunderstands his words, so she approaches him but falls on him, accusing him of planning something terrible for Maria. Takumi gets confused, but before he can explain, Sophia collapses from exhaustion. Takumi realizes she's overworked and notices an injury on her hand. He attempts to heal her, but the process consumes far more mana than usual, likely due to the curse affecting her. Then after expending significant effort, he manages to fully heal her, and in doing so, his light magic levels up. Afterward, Takumi carries Sophia to her room and asks Maria if Sophia's collapse happens often. Maria explains that Sophia has fainted from exhaustion before, usually when she moves too suddenly or gets overly excited, and she suspects the cause is the curse affecting Sophia. Determined to help, Takumi begins a healing process, combining his Dispel spell with extra heal to treat her condition. And he successfully regenerates Sophia's ear and completes the treatment. Sometime later, Sophia wakes up, confused about how she got to her room, so Maria asks if she's feeling alright, and Sophia admits that she feels lighter than ever. But then she quickly recalls her earlier misunderstanding, so she panics and urges Maria to run away, claiming Takumi isn't the man Maria thinks he is. Maria, however, smiles and tells Sophia that Takumi is even better than she imagined. Sophia confusedly demands to know what Maria is talking about, so Maria hands her a mirror, and Sophia stares at her reflection, shocked because her ear is back to normal. She also realizes that her magic, which had been sealed for years, has returned, so Maria explains that Takumi cured her. Later, Sophia meets Takumi and asks him about what happened. He explains that earlier he had been cutting and healing himself to level up his light magic so he could properly heal her. Sophia then curiously asks what he meant when he mentioned that Maria had messed up. Takumi clarifies that Maria had mistakenly thrown away some medicinal herbs he collected, mistaking them for trash. Sophia, embarrassed by her misunderstanding, then asks why he went to such lengths to help her, especially since it was dangerous for him, and Takumi simply replies that he was keeping his promise. Hearing this, Sophia bursts into tears, deeply moved by his kindness. She then kneels before him and swears her lifelong loyalty, vowing to serve him with unwavering devotion. The next day, we find Takumi in a quiet library, flipping through dusty alchemy books to dig deeper into this world's magic. To his frustration, most of the texts barely scratch the surface of alchemy, leaving him puzzled as to why such a straightforward discipline has faded into obscurity. But after some thought, he concludes that alchemy must be a relic of an ancient magical civilization. Conveniently, Lady Nolan's blessing allows him to understand all languages in this world, making even the most complex alchemy books laughably simple for him to comprehend. Armed with new knowledge, Takumi returns home, where Maria greets him with sandwiches for lunch. As they eat, Maria begins muttering to herself about how heartwarming it was to see Takumi and Sophia reconciling the day before. She sheepishly admits she had been spying on them from behind the curtains, because apparently personal privacy is overrated. She gushes about how romantic it was to witness Sophia pledging her loyalty to Takumi, likening it to a knight swearing to protect a princess. Except in this case, Takumi is the princess. Maria and Maple wholeheartedly agree that Takumi makes an admirable princess. Much to his utter embarrassment, he can only respond with a cringing smile. Later in the afternoon, Takumi heads outside to work on his production business because today's task involves packaging a bulk order of toilets for Papek. Aria and Sophia join him, cleaning and packing the goods while Takumi daydreams about breaking free from the monotony of manufacturing. He casually shares his thoughts with Maria and Sophia, confessing his longing to explore the world. He dreams of hunting exotic materials, sampling unique meals, and uncovering hidden ruins. Naturally, he also mentions taking Sophia along as his bodyguard, while leaving Maria behind to manage the mansion. Maria, however, is less than thrilled about being left behind, while even the spider Maple gets to tag along, and that's just too much for her to bear. She then hits in with her signature, cute yet manipulative maid look, and predictably, Takumi falls for it. But before deciding, Takumi checks Maria's stats by gently rubbing her face to open her status window, because apparently that's how status windows work. And to his surprise, her stats are better than expected, suggesting she could handle combat. Impressed, Takumi decides to bring her along on his future adventures, but insists that she trains with Sophia to refine her skills first. With that settled, Takumi starts crafting weapons and armor for Sophia and Maria. When he asks for their preferences, Sophia doesn't hold back. She hands him an extensive, borderline excessive list of her weapon requests and volunteers Maria for a spear, promising to train her personally. Takumi then gathers the necessary materials and gets to work, channeling his alchemy manipulation magic to speed up the process. Meanwhile, Sophia puts Maria through her paces, and Maria quickly discovers that being a battle maid involves a lot more sweat and significantly fewer tea parties. Takumi finishes the weapons in record time, adding personal touches, a wing pattern for Sophia's weapon, and a flame motif for Maria's spear. Of course, he goes the extra mile and enchants them with auto-repair and attack boosts because, well, why not add a little extra power? As Takumi works, his mind wanders into dangerous territory. He imagines Maria wielding her spear in full maid attire, and his overactive imagination leads to a classic anime-style nosebleed. To make matters worse, Maria, somehow sensing this moment of unholy admiration, through what she calls maid telepathy, claims she can feel someone ogling her sacred plot. Takumi tries to shake it off and focuses on the next task, crafting armor. Naturally, his first instinct is to go full RPG mode and consider making enchanted undergarments instead of practical gear because, let's face it, that seems to be standard in these worlds. But even Takumi realizes this idea crosses too many lines, especially since Maria and Sophia are technically his employees and not participants in his questionable cosplay daydreams. The real challenge, however, is getting their measurements. Asking directly would only earn him a one-way ticket to Pervsville. But Takumi has a solution. With a mischievous grin straight out of a shonen villain's playbook, he uses his alchemy magic to create life-size replicas of Sophia and Maria. He spends a hilariously awkward amount of time staring at these mannequins, particularly at their melons, because professionalism has never been his strong suit. Let's just say Takumi's imagination runs wild as he revels in the fantasy of being the master of his two servants. After several days of work, Takumi finally finishes the armor, which looks nothing like what you'd expect. Sophia gets a simple breastplate, and Maria's armor is basically a ready-made outfit that belongs in a fantasy game. Surprisingly, both girls are thrilled by the design, but Sophia pauses to wonder how Takumi matched their sizes so perfectly without taking measurements. Takumi naturally keeps this a secret because he can't exactly confess his pervy methods after all. With that sorted, the trio heads to the Adventurers Guild so Sophia and Maria can be registered and obtain travel licenses for venturing outside the city. After the girls receive their guild cards, Takumi registers the three of them as a new party and prepares to accept their first quest together. Just as he's about to pick one, a group of D-ranked adventurers approaches, their leader being an overweight thug with an oversized ego. They immediately start picking on the group, telling the girls to dump Takumi and spend their time with someone more deserving than an F-rank loser like him. Takumi doesn't take this insult lightly. Though internally terrified of the fat thug leading the group, he wants to protect his friend's honor. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stands his ground and uses physical enhancement magic to block the thug's attack. However, when the thug's punch connects, his own arm breaks from the impact, leaving Takumi unharmed. Just as things are about to escalate further, the guild master arrives to put a stop to the commotion. However, upon seeing the injured thug, the guild master immediately blames Takumi for the incident, completely unaware that the thug hurt himself trying to attack Takumi. As the guild master scolds Takumi, Sophia, and Maria, the receptionist Hans intervenes, explaining that the white-haired idiot hadn't started the fight and was only defending himself. When Hans addresses the guild master by his title, Takumi's jaw nearly hits the floor. He's shocked to learn that the bald-headed, angry bird-looking man is actually the guild master. Hans formally introduces him as Barak. Ignoring the introduction, Barak sternly orders Hans to heal the thug's broken arm. Afterward, Barak asks Takumi and the girls to follow him. In what feels like an interrogation room, the guildmaster demands to know what Takumi's deal is. Initially hesitant to reveal his abilities, Takumi is forced to explain when Hans mentions detecting traces of magic at the fight scene. Hearing this, Takumi realizes how sharp Hans' sense skills must be. While admitting to using magic, Takumi clarifies that he didn't cast any spells on the goons from earlier. Instead, he explains that he coated his body with charcoal from his item box. Hans doubts him but becomes convinced when Takumi adds that he synthesized the coal into diamond. Recognizing this as alchemy, Hans recalls that Takumi had initially wanted to join the Alchemist Guild when they first met. Ignoring the magic talk, Barak shifts the conversation to the women in Takumi's party. When Sophia and Maria confirm they're his teammates, Hans suggests promoting Takumi to rank D to deter further harassment from weaklings. Barak agrees, noting it might prevent more skirmishes like the earlier one. However, since Sophia and Maria just joined the guild that day, Hans proposed assigning them some starter quests to help them rank up quickly. Realizing that climbing the ranks would make them better protectors for their master, the girls eagerly accept. Later that day, the trio heads into the woods to tackle their quests. They've been tasked with 3 jobs: exterminating goblins, dealing with kobolds, and gathering herbs. As they venture into the forest, Maple signals Takumi about goblins hiding in the bushes. Takumi alerts the girls and Sophia charges in, swiftly attacking the goblins. 2 more goblins rush out, but Maple ensnares their legs with her webs, allowing Takumi and Maria to finish them off with well-placed strikes. As they move forward, Takumi grows increasingly uneasy at the sheer number of kobolds and goblins they keep encountering. No matter how many they kill, more seem to appear. Sophia speculates that there's likely an encampment nearby, possibly with a general leading the monsters. The mere mention of a goblin general makes Takumi feel like his bladder might betray him. Sophia doesn't help, casually mentioning that it typically takes 5 rank D adventurer parties to wipe out an encampment with a general. The thought feels impossible to Takumi, but Sophia is confident they can pull it off if they combine their unique magic skills for a surprise attack. While her plan sounds promising, Takumi internally screams, wishing he were anywhere else but here. To make matters worse, Maple suddenly announces that it's about to evolve. Panicked, Takumi immediately opens an emergency portal to his pocket dimension and hurriedly sends Maple into it to avoid any surprises. Pressing on, they finally locate the monsters' camp. Sophia estimates that there are around 300 to 400 enemies. The number alone is enough to make Takumi's legs wobble as he anxiously reconsiders their options. With the enemy's location confirmed, Sophia, Maria, and Takumi raise their tightly clenched fists, activating the magic rings that Takumi gave them before for a coordinated strike. Sophia's powerful wind magic, Maria's massive rock barrage, and Takumi's blazing firestorm combine into a devastating attack, wreaking havoc on the monsters' camp and decimating their numbers. For a brief shining moment, the clueless coward Takumi believes they've won. But his hope shatters when an enormous goblin general and two knights emerge from the rubble, and their grotesque appearance sends chills down Takumi's spine. Sophia then charges at the goblin general while leaving the knights to Takumi and Maria. But despite being a coward at heart, Takumi defends himself and uses his fire magic to obliterate one of the goblins. Once the group completes their quests, they return to the guild exhausted. Seeing their haul of magic stones leaves Hans in shock. He can't believe they managed to complete the quests in a single day. Surprised, Hans takes them to the back room to meet the guild master. The guild master is just as stunned as Hans, wondering how they achieved such a feat so quickly. But before he can question them further, Maple enters in her half-human form and slaps the guild master on his bald head before introducing herself. Takumi and Sophia are shocked by her new form, but Maria is delighted and excited to hear Maple speak for the first time. And after that shit, Takumi is promoted to rank E, while Sophia and Maria are promoted to rank F. Later, Maria shows Takumi a design for new undergarments for her and Sophia. And when Takumi looks at Maria's initial design, it resembles men's undergarments. And naturally, the perv can't let that slide, so he sketches a more feminine design for them. And the moment Maria sees it, her cheeks flush furiously, and she stammers as she begs him to make it. While they talk, Maple informs Takumi that Pepek has arrived. Pepek faints upon seeing Maple's new form, but when he recovers, he tells Takumi that the Lord of Bolton has summoned him to express gratitude for the toilet he made. When Takumi meets the Lord, he is thanked repeatedly for his contributions to the town's sanitation. The Lord's kindness surprises Takumi, who starts to think of him as a good and honorable leader. Later that evening, Maple delivers the finished underwear to the girls. As they hold it up, they marvel at how comfortable it feels and jokingly ask if they can try it on in front of Takumi. This suggestion is enough to make the virgin dimwit freak out entirely. Screaming like a scared little girl, he bolts into his room and slams the door behind him, leaving the girls laughing at his embarrassment and thinking that he is too chicken. The scene then shifts to Takumi putting the final touches on his refrigerators. Maple inspects one with fascination, marveling at the cool air inside. Takumi explains that the fridge is designed to keep food fresh for longer, preventing it from spoiling too quickly. The other girls gather around, enjoying the refreshing breeze, but Takumi warns them not to leave the doors open for too long. He then walks them through the process of how he built the fridge, and Maria, clearly thrilled, thanks him, excited that she can now cook with fresh ingredients whenever she wants. Takumi then asks which color they prefer, and after some discussion, they settle on the blue one. Satisfied, Takumi takes the remaining refrigerators to Pepek, letting him know that he's ready to start his next project. Sophia, curious as ever, wonders if he's inventing something new yet again. However, Takumi tells her that this time he's thinking about upgrading their equipment. After their recent fight with the Goblin General, he realized that their current gear won't be sufficient for their future journeys. He adds that both his blacksmith and alchemist levels have improved recently, so instead of using magic steel, he plans to work with adamantite and mithril. This surprises Sophia, but she looks forward to seeing what he can create. Afterward, Takumi seeks out Hans to ask where he can find mithril and adamantite. Hans informs him that both are extremely rare ores and that there are no blacksmiths in the city capable of refining them properly. Still, he offers Takumi a list of skilled blacksmiths who live in the area. He also points out that since Takumi is an alchemist, he might be able to synthesize the ores himself. Takumi is surprised by this suggestion, but Hans explains that synthesizing them would be incredibly time-consuming and drain a massive amount of mana. He then suggests a more practical approach, mining the ores directly from a town called Horaz, located northwest of the Kingdom of Barcula. However, there's a catch. The mines are restricted and only members of the Blacksmith Guild are allowed entry. Fortunately, there's a loophole. If Takumi accepts a quest to eliminate the monsters that occasionally appear in the mine, he'll be granted temporary access. This means he could mine the ores while also completing the quest, so Takumi believes that if he does this will mean killing two birds with one stone. The guildmaster then suddenly appears, informing Takumi that Bolton has been experiencing a shortage of trint wood. He explains that this is due to most adventurers prioritizing black buffalo hunts, which are common around this time of the year. He emphasizes that this is a serious issue and casually points out that the Forest of Death, where trint wood can be found, happens to be on the way to Horaz. Takumi immediately realizes that the guildmaster is trying to rope him into hunting trints as well. The guildmaster confirms this assumption and further mentions that hauling back all that trint wood shouldn't be an issue for Takumi since he has space-time magic. Takumi agrees to take on the task since he also uses trint wood himself, but the guildmaster isn't finished yet. He brings up a blacksmith who needs to travel to Horaz and requires an escort, once again pushing another mission onto Takumi. At this point, Takumi can't help but think that this guild is absurdly exploitive. The guildmaster then attempts to sweeten the deal, offering Takumi a promotion to rank D if he completes the quest. However, Takumi is skeptical, revealing that he has never taken an escort mission before. He suggests that the Lion Fangs would be better suited for the job, but the guildmaster informs him that they are already occupied with another quest. Accepting his fate, Takumi shifts gears and asks how long the journey to Horace would take. Hans explains that a standard horse carriage would take about 7 days, whereas a monster horse carriage could make the trip in 4. Understanding the situation, Takumi requests a monster horse carriage, but Hans disappoints him by revealing that they are all currently in use. Just then, Real enters the room, stating that their party is the one using them. Hans assumes that Real's group must have completed their quest, but Real clarifies that they haven't. He is only here to deliver a black buffalo they hunted along the way. He warns the guildmaster that upcoming escort missions will be dangerous due to an increase in advanced species in the forest. However, the guildmaster remains unfazed, remarking that higher risk means higher rewards. Real shakes his head at the guildmaster's cold attitude and mentions that he will be departing tomorrow morning to rejoin his party. Seeing an opportunity, Takumi offers Real a place to stay at his house, even telling him he can use the bath, so Real happily agrees. But before they part ways, Takumi mentions that he has some business to handle first and offers to give Real his home address, and he will catch up to him later. However, Real simply shrugs and says he'll just tag along. The two of them then head to Papek's company, where Papek readily agrees to lend Takumi a monster horse carriage for his mission. In return, he asks Takumi to wholesale some of the ores he mines, to which Takumi agrees. Papek then eagerly shows off the fridge Takumi made, practically begging him to produce more, completely obsessed with the invention. Meanwhile, back at Takumi's house, Sophia is growing anxious. She paces around, worried that her master still hasn't returned home. Thoughts race through her mind, wondering if something bad has happened to him, and she deeply regrets not accompanying him on his excursion. As night falls, Takumi and Real finally make their way back to the mansion, frustrated that they weren't able to find any blacksmiths skilled in working with mithril. Takumi mentions that they managed to visit everyone on the list except for one, as his shop was closed. Just then, they come across a hooded figure blocking their path. Real immediately senses a dangerous aura radiating from the figure and instinctively tries to pull Takumi away, but before they can escape, the figure moves to intercept them with a swift kick to Real's head. To their shock, the hooded person reveals themselves. It's Sophia. Mistaking Real for a kidnapper, she lunges at him with full intent to kill, but Takumi quickly steps in to stop her. After a tense moment, he explains the situation and Sophia immediately apologizes. Real, still shaken, shrugs it off, but now has a mountain of questions about Takumi's life. When they finally arrive at the mansion, Real is taken aback by the number of girls living in Takumi's house. He eyes them all suspiciously and wonders what kind of wild life his friend is leading. Takumi casually explains that he needed help around the house, so he bought some slaves. As Real processes this, his attention shifts to Maple, who has now evolved into an Araxian. Excitedly, he asks if she remembers him, only for Maple to glare at him with pure hatred, completely crushing his fragile heart. Real groans about how unfair life is, lamenting that Takumi is surrounded by beautiful women, while he remains the only single member of his party. Takumi, trying to console him, reassures him that none of these girls are his girlfriends. So this gives Real a sudden boost of confidence, prompting him to boldly ask both Maria and Sophia out on a date. However, they shut him down immediately, stating that they have dedicated their lives to Takumi. Takumi then just tells him to take a damn bath, and later we see Real pathetically bathing with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, Takumi and the others gather for a strategy meeting. Sophia agrees with Takumi's plan to take down some trance, mentioning that she is also fine with exterminating monsters in the mine to collect ores. The group reaffirms their commitment to the mission, promising to do their best. Takumi nods, telling them that they will depart in 3 days. With that in mind, he decides that he needs to forge better equipment for his party before they set out. The next morning, Real leaves the mansion, and afterward, Takumi examines the mana-draining sword he obtained from the Goblin Emperor. He discovers that it's made of tungsten carbide, an incredibly hard substance, and realizes that the weapon is far too large to be practical for a human. Deciding to repropose it, he attempts to melt it down, but the sword resists his efforts. After a great deal of perseverance, he finally manages to forge the massive blade into 2 human-sized swords. Noting that the blade absorbs an opponent's mana to become sharper and stronger, he decides to gift one to Sophia. 3 days later, Takumi and his group prepare to depart for Horace. Payback informs him that the client for the escort mission is already inside the carriage. Introducing himself, Takumi meets Gambo the blacksmith, who will be accompanying them. With everything set, they set off on their journey. Back at the guild, the guildmaster receives urgent news from the Horace Guild that monster activity in the forest has significantly increased. However, he realizes that it's too late to act, as Takumi's party has already left for the Forest of Death. so he hopes they don't run into any advanced species, knowing how dangerous the journey could become. Meanwhile, Takumi and the others continue onward, unaware of the looming threat. Meanwhile, back in the royal capital, a messenger from the palace meets with Pepek, expressing gratitude for the toilets he provided to the king. The official informs him that they are considering implementing them throughout the capital, believing this innovation will completely resolve their long-standing sewage problems. Pepek is pleased to hear this, but the official then warns him that word of this advancement has spread far, even reaching the Holy Sidonia Empire. Given their reputation, the empire is likely to take action. Fast-forwarding a year into the future, we see that both Yamato and Akira have grown into formidable fighters, impressing those around them with their rapid development. However, Akane remains skeptical of Elizabeth, keeping a watchful eye on her. Returning to Takumi's group, they make a stop near the Forest of Death. Takumi casts a protective barrier around their camp and instructs Gambo to stay inside while they deal with the trance. The scene then shifts to them deep in the Forest of Death, where Takumi asks Sophia how to tell the difference between a treant and a regular tree. Sophia explains that he needs to focus and sense their magic while observing their surroundings. She then points at one, revealing it to be a treant, and Takumi immediately charges at it. He tries to strike him with its roots, but Maple and the others step in to cover him. Seizing the opportunity, he thrusts his spear into the monster, bringing it down and leveling up both his axemanship and logging skills. Thinking these creatures are weak, Takumi assumes this will be an easy task. However, Sophia warns him that they are surrounded and suggests using magic to take them down more efficiently. The team unleashes their spells, cutting and burning through the treants, and as the battle rages on, Takumi levels up several of his skills. Suddenly, an elder treant appears, significantly stronger than the rest. The girls attack, but their strikes have no lasting effect as the monster regenerates instantly. Seeing this, Sophia tells Takumi they must take it down in a single decisive strike. So she instructs him to coat his blade in fire magic, which he does before rushing the elder treant. Dodging its attacks, he lands a direct strike to its eye, dealing a fatal blow. With that, the creature is finally defeated, and Takumi's skills level up again. Takumi then notices a strange fruit on the ground and is surprised to learn that treants bear fruit. Sophia identifies them as miracle apples, an extremely rare find. So Takumi suggests they take them home, and Maria, excited, announces her plans to bake an apple pie. Later, the group arrives in Horace and heads straight to the Adventurers Guild. Takumi decides to take a quest to hunt iron moles in order to gain entry to the mine. Soon after, we see the party mining alongside Gambo. Takumi successfully unearths some mithril, and Gambo directs him to a spot containing adamantite ore. Gambo is amazed at Takumi's luck, as it's rare to find such valuable materials on a first mining expedition. Just then, an iron mole suddenly emerges from the ground, and without hesitation, Takumi blinds it using his light magic, allowing Sophia to swiftly finish it off. The others marvel at how effortlessly he took down the creature, and Takumi explains that he figured light magic would work since iron moles thrive in darkness. Sophia is still surprised by how easy it was, while Maria pouts, disappointed that she didn't get to contribute in any shit. With their quest complete, they mine a massive load of ore before returning to Bolton. The next day, Takumi visits Gambo's shop, eager to learn the basics of synthesizing and forging mithril and adamantite alloys. Gambo agrees to teach him and starts by having Takumi forge a mithril knife. Afterward, Takumi upgrades the girls' armor using the high-quality materials he obtained, ensuring they are better prepared for future battles. The scene then shifts to the girls trying on their new armor, utterly speechless at the number of unique skills and enchantments infused within them. Sophia's armor is imbued with wind and water elements, while Maria's carries fire and earth attributes. Takumi explains that to embed their elemental affinities into the armor, he had to saturate magic stones with his mana until they turned blue. Curious, Maria asks Takumi how he enhanced his thunderclap skill, and he proudly reveals that he enchanted it with enhanced agility, making him significantly faster. To demonstrate, he takes off at high speed, but loses control and crashes straight into the wall. The girls, wanting to spare him the embarrassment, pretend not to have seen anything, while Takumi realizes he needs to get used to his newfound speed. Next, he presents Maria with her new spear, Explode, which can fire fireballs, while Sophia receives Tempest, a spear that releases wind energy. She then tells Takumi that if he ever finds himself in danger, she wants to be the one to protect him, even at the cost of her life, so she asks him to craft a shield for her so she can guard him more effectively. Moved by her dedication, Takumi agrees to make a shield for her, but he gently reminds her to value her own life as well. Meanwhile, Lady Nolan observes Takumi from afar, but when she turns her vision toward Akira and Yamato, she sees an ominous scene unfold. The story then jumps 1 year into the future, revealing that in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, the heroes are preparing to march into the Kingdom of Somandor. The Emperor entrusts them with the mission, and the heroes swear to do everything in their power for the sake of the world's peace. Back in the present, Takumi finally completes the shield, but the effort has completely drained him. Sophia, watching him from a nearby window, feels guilty for requesting the shield, seeing how exhausted he is. She begins to think that Takumi would have an easier time if he had someone to assist him in his workshop. Meanwhile, in the royal capital of Bakulatos in the kingdom of Barkula, the king receives an urgent letter. It reveals that the Holy Empire of Sidonia has learned about the purification magic and is demanding further details. The advisor from earlier speculates that another messenger may arrive within days, but the king grimly notes that despite the polite wording, this is nothing short of a veiled threat. The scene then shifts to a meeting between a representative from Sidonia and the king of Barkula. The envoy reveals that whispers have spread about the use of a mystical device to cleanse their sewers. He explains that the Church of Divine Light has formally appealed to Sidonia's pope, insisting that light magic is a divine endowment meant exclusively for their church. In other words, the power of purification magic is claimed as the church's rightful domain. The king feigns ignorance and asks what exactly that implies. The messenger elaborates that the pope demands the transfer of the purification magic circle and its patent to the church. The king retorts that if this power truly comes from God, then the church ought to be able to craft its own magic circle without external assistance. The envoy adds that the pope has further decreed that using sacred purification magic on a magical toilet is utterly unforgivable, and that the culprit responsible for creating such a device must be handed over to the Empire of Sidonia. The king flatly refuses this ultimatum, and in response, the messenger warns that the pope plans to recall the priests of the Church of Divine Light from their kingdom if the demand isn't met. Unmoved, the king curtly replies that if the church insists on recalling its priests, then so be it. The narrative then cuts to Papek informing Takumi of the unfolding drama. Takumi is astonished that the king would adopt such a severe stance towards Sidonia's emissaries solely for him. Papek reassures him that it isn't a major problem, but Takumi points out that such actions might turn the church against them. Papek then reveals that within this kingdom there exists another religious faction besides the Church of Divine Light, a fact that catches Takumi's attention as he deduces that he must be referring to the Church of Creation. Papek is surprised that Takumi is aware of this alternative faith and goes on to explain that the Church of Creation venerates Lady Nolan. Curious, Takumi asks which deity the Church of Divine Light worships, and Papek responds that they revere a god known as Anat. Shifting the conversation, Papek notes that the kingdom of Barkula prides itself on religious freedom, which has allowed the long-established Church of Creation to amass many followers. Unlike the Church of Divine Light, whose priests demand exorbitant fees for their recovery magic, the clergy of the Church of Creation performs similar feats merely as a gesture of goodwill. Realizing the implications, Takumi concludes that the Church of Divine Light is being bolstered by the Holy Empire of Sidonia, and he wisely decides that it would be best for him to steer clear of getting entangled with them. Papek then informs Takumi that he's actually here today with a special request. He explains that through Marquis Godwin, he had offered the king some samples of his innovative toilets and refrigerators, and in return, the king has requested a meeting with Takumi. Takumi is taken aback by this news, and Papek adds that although the king won't be angry if Takumi declines, his pleading puppy dog eyes tend to sway decisions regardless. Later, Takumi gathers his slaves and announces that he will be heading to the royal capital of Bakulatos, asking if any of them would like to accompany him. Excited at the prospect of visiting the capital for the first time, they all agree, and Takumi informs them that they'll be departing in a week, advising them to prepare in the meantime. Maria wonders aloud how long the journey will take, and Takumi explains that if they ride monster horses, it should take about a week, so Maria immediately points out that such a trip would require plenty of food. Leaving the logistics to Maria, Takumi then mentions that he plans to craft new cloaks for the group while they wait. Curious, the others ask why, and he reveals that Papek has secured some dark elemental magic stones for him. With these stones, he can enchant the cloaks to block perception, a feature that Sophia praises as being especially useful in combat. Takumi also notes that the cloaks will help the girls avoid unwanted attention from unsavory perverted characters in town. The scene then shifts to the two girls out shopping in town. Maria remarks that Takumi isn't valuing himself as highly as he should, and Sophia agrees, even beginning to list all of his admirable qualities. Surprised by how well she seems to know their master, Maria teases Sophia about it. Embarrassed, Sophia quickly changes the subject, making it clear to Maria that she's totally smitten. The scene then shifts to Takumi kneeling in a quiet church as he prays to Lady Nolan. She greets him, inquiring where his offering is, and he beams at the sight of her once again. Aware that his journey to the capital is imminent, she asks if he has come to seek safe passage, and she requests that he present her offering. Takumi, however, insists on having some questions answered first. He asks her whether Anat exists as a supreme being distinct from her. and with an air of quiet authority, she declares that she is the sole supreme entity, leaving him to wonder who or what Anat might be. Offering only vague reassurances that he will come to understand in time, she leaves him still curious, especially as the Empire of Sidonia appears to be encroaching ever closer. Takumi recalls her earlier words about her blessings being conditional upon his actions and asks if Sidonia's interference is linked to that very clause. She dismisses his query, reminding him that it is precisely Sidonia that brought him here, a matter far beyond the scope of a mere blessing. The young mage then recalls rumors of heroes summoned by Sidonia and presses her for news, noting that he has heard nothing of them since his arrival in this world. Lady Nolan then reveals a startling truth. She has actually sent him back in time by 1 year, meaning the heroes have yet to be summoned. Takumi is puzzled by this intricate twist, and when he persists with his barrage of questions, she curtly tells him that time is up. Before he can continue, Lady Nolan strikes him, and he loses consciousness, awakening later in the real world. He reflects that she must have been evading his inquiries, but he shrugs it off as he has no real desire to meet these heroes anyway. The narrative then jumps forward 10 months into the future within the Holy Empire of Sidonia. Their Akira is shown training diligently with his sword, having honed his skills considerably, while Akane and Yamato watch his progress with admiration. Back to the present, and we see Takumi presenting the new cloaks to the girls. Maple immediately notices that the cloaks perfectly complement his attire, while Sophia initially remarks that the matching ensemble is a bit too bold, so Takumi wonders if perhaps she dislikes the look. However, Sophia quickly assures him that she loves it, much to his relief and delight. Later, we learn that Takumi plans to build his own carriage rather than borrowing one from the guild, aiming for greater comfort. He explains that although he can construct a carriage, they lack a monster horse, so he initially considers borrowing one from the guild. However, Maria steps in and reminds him that this town is known as the City of Adventurers for a reason. She recalls the perils of the Forest of Death and warns him that many dangerous areas with lurking monsters exist. In her view, there are not only monster horses but also unicorns and drake horses, creatures that are both faster and sturdier. The scene then shifts to the forest surrounding the city, where Takumi ponders whether drake horses are truly swifter than monster horses. Sophia confirms that they are and even add that they possess superior stamina. Curious, Takumi asks if this speed is due to their being of a dragon type, to which Maria clarifies that while they aren't actually dragons, they do resemble normal horses, except they sport a horn and are covered in scales reminiscent of a dragon's hide. Realizing this is the origin of their name, Takumi nods in understanding, and Maple becomes excited at the thought of finally having a monster friend. Suddenly, Takumi and the others encounter a bush wolf that dashes right past them. Sophia looks puzzled, and Takumi attributes the wolf's failure to detect them to the effectiveness of their new cloaks. While he praises the cloaks for keeping them hidden, Sophia removes hers, arguing that they need to engage in combat to train and strengthen themselves. The narrative then transitions to a scene of Sophia defeating a boar, prompting Maria to remark that they've now got extra meat. Maple urges them to hurry up, and Takumi soon spots a fallen tree. Recognizing its value, he decides to salvage it for its wood, which he intends to use in building the carriage, especially since he had been considering buying some from Papek. Despite Maple's impatient protests for them to speed things along, Takumi and the others set about chopping up the meat and collecting the wood. Irritated, Maple storms off on her own, dashing through the forest and noting the numerous dead trees scattered about. As she ventures further, she senses something ahead and soon discovers an injured drake horse. The creature throws his magic at her, but she deftly dodges the attack, a move that reminds her of the time when she was injured and Takumi had helped her. In that moment, she tells the drake horse that her master is truly exceptional at healing, but just then 2 giant ants begin to approach them. Maple notices that the giant ants are the very threat afflicting the drake horse, and she swiftly binds them using her finely spun threads, allowing the drake horse to finish off them. Just as she prepares to leave and summon her master, she suddenly finds herself encircled by a swarm of even larger ants. Desperate, she weaves several layers of her threads into a protective barrier, but the relentless ants begin tearing it apart. Frantically, Maple attempts to reach her master via telepathy, yet no response comes, so she wonders if he's too occupied with chopping wood to notice her distress. And as her concern grows, the drake horse collapses from its injuries. As the ants continue to dismantle her barrier, Maple breaks down in tears, lamenting her master's absence. Just then, the ants finally tear the barrier apart, and Maple instinctively tries to shield the drake horse with her own body. And at that crucial instant, she feels a gentle hand on her head and realizes that her master has arrived. It turns out that the rest of the group has managed to eliminate the invading ants. Maple, still shaken, asks Takumi where he had been, as she had been desperately calling out his name. So he apologizes and explains that her threads had interfered with their telepathic link, but he sensed something was awry when their mana connection dropped, so he followed the trail that she left. He offers a sincere apology for his tardiness, and Maria points out the injured Drake horse. Takumi examines the creature and sees that it has lost consciousness from its wounds, so Maple pleads with him to save the horse. Recognizing that Maple had been trying to protect the animal, Takumi attempts to cast a healing spell on the Drake horse, only to be repelled by its instinctive wariness of humans even in its unconscious state. Realizing that the Drake horse's condition might be fatal if things continue as they are, and with Sophia alerting them to the approach of additional monsters, Takumi has no choice but to retreat both Maple and the horse into his pocket dimension for safety. After he does, Sophia urgently warns him that housing an advanced monster in his pocket dimension without a familiar contract might cause him severe strain. Takumi assures her that he'll be fine, but then when he feels tired, he quickly tries to gulp down a potion to bolster himself, but before he can drink it, he collapses from exhaustion. Later, we see Takumi slumped in his room fast asleep with the girls quietly keeping vigil by his side because he's been out for over 12 hours. Sophia remarks to Maria that Takumi won't wake until he's successfully stabilized his pocket dimension, while Maria wonders why Maple hasn't emerged yet. So Sophia speculates that the Drake horse remains terrified, and as long as Maple keeps the creature confined in the pocket dimension, it will continue to spook it, causing Takumi to slowly wither away. Convinced that something must be done, Sophia kisses his hand and follows his mana signature, eventually finding Maple. She inquires about the Drake horse's condition, and Maple confirms that it's still trembling in fear. Sophia suggests she might be able to coax the Drake horse out, but cautions that releasing it into an unfamiliar area could confuse the animal. She points out that unless the creature comes out, it won't receive any healing, and Takumi will remain unconscious. To solve the problem, Sophia proposes that Maple recreate the barrier she had previously woven in the forest. Such a shield would conceal the true location of the Drake horse. Maple agrees, then steps into the garden with the Drake horse to form a new protective barrier. Meanwhile, Sophia intends to visit Papek's company to acquire some monster medicine, but Maria volunteers to go instead, urging Sophia to stay close to their master. The scene then shifts to Sophia watching over Takumi as he sleeps. In his dreams, Takumi relives moments spent with everyone, until eventually he stirs awake. Opening his eyes, he notices Sophia still sleeping by his bedside, and when she eventually wakes, she beams at the sight of her master and he thanks her warmly for watching over him. He mentions that he needs to check on the Drake horse and steps inside Maple's barrier. Noticing that the creature seems to have recovered a bit, Takumi asks if it might become a friend as well, given that it's already grown close to Maple. He uses his magic to gently tame the Drake horse, and succeeds. Following this, Takumi casts a powerful healing spell to restore the creature's health, and Maple dispels the barrier around it. Takumi announces that they have gained a new companion, prompting Maple to ask what name they should give her. Inspired, Takumi decides to name the Drake horse Camellia, after a leaf-bearing tree that retains its foliage year-round and blossoms with red and white flowers. The girls all agree that it's a lovely name, and Maria suggests they all sit down to eat, announcing that she has just finished preparing dinner. Next, the scene shifts to the bustling capital of Barkula at the Palom Trading Company. There, the owner is desperately trying to sell a beastman slave endowed with magical abilities, but the prospective buyer shows no interest. Although he acknowledges that a beastman with such powers is a rare find, he demands a demonstration of her magic. The girl insists that she plans to study hard and prove her worth. Frustrated by her inability to serve his immediate needs, the buyer leaves without making a purchase. Disappointed, the young girl Riva is consoled by the owner, who assures her that a good master will eventually come along. Later on, we find Riva alone in her modest room, lost in thought. She recalls the days when she still lived with her family, days marred by financial hardship that forced her to leave for the city to save some money, and with a promise to send money back to her brother. Yet despite all her efforts, she hasn't managed to fulfill that promise. The narrative then transitions to Takumi's mansion, where Maria casually inquires whether he plans to visit Gambo's workshop once more. Takumi confirms that he does, explaining that his carriage urgently requires some expert blacksmith work. Sophia, ever the warrior, points out that he recently took on an extra order for potions and refrigerators and hasn't had a moment's rest in days. Maria urges him to take care of himself, but he insists he's fine as he sets out. Not long after, at the Adventurers Guild, Takumi overhears a heated discussion about a mysterious, unsettling creature reportedly seen on the city's outskirts. Curious, he approaches the receptionist, who explains that recent reports have described a bizarre creature roaming near the city's edge. He even shows him a crude sketch, noting how strange it is that no significant damage has yet been recorded. Then, when asked about his own presence, Takumi reveals that he's here to register a new pet. The receptionist's eyes light up with excitement, He remarks that it takes something truly extraordinary to surprise him these days. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Takumi unveils his pet camellia. Almost immediately, the guild members notice that camellia bears an uncanny resemblance to the creature in the sketch. Alarmed by this startling coincidence, the guild master swiftly summons Takumi for a private discussion. Meanwhile, as the town bustles around, Sophia strolls through the streets, her thoughts still lingering on her recent trip to Mulan Trading Company. She remembers how she'd been on the hunt for a beastman slave with magical abilities to assist Takumi with his production, but no candidate proved suitable. Still, Mulan had promised to spread the word among other traders, and Sophia had thanked her warmly. But before she left, Mulan even remarked that Sophia had changed ever since sealing her contract with Takumi. In the present, Maria bumps into Sophia on the street. Sophia casually asks if Maria's done shopping yet, to which Maria replies that she still needs to visit the butcher. Sophia then confides that Takumi seems constantly worn out these days, and she wishes she could ease his burden by ensuring he gets plenty of nutrition. Though she longs to help, she admits she isn't skilled enough in alchemy, and Maria assures her she'll do her best through cooking. When Sophia offers to lend a hand, Maria insists that it's best if she sticks to her own duties. Sophia takes the gentle rebuff in stride, and Maria notes that Sophia appears noticeably different, her expression softer, more at ease. Surprised to hear the observation a second time, Sophia blushes and quickly changes the subject, suggesting that they go pick up Takumi. They soon arrive at Dambo's workshop, only to find Takumi fast asleep at his station. Dambo explains that Takumi was utterly exhausted and dozed off mid-work, warning that if he continues at this pace, he'll collapse. Not long after, Takumi proudly unveils his newly finished carriage and invites Camellia to pull it. But before taking it out for a test drive, the girls examine it closely and are astonished to discover that it's not just a carriage, it's essentially a moving house complete with individual rooms and bathrooms. They embark on a ride, and despite the vehicle shaking on the outside, the interior remains remarkably smooth and comfortable. Curious, Takumi asks Maria for her thoughts. While she expresses her approval, she suggests adding some decorative blades along the sides. When he inquires about the idea, Maria grins and says it would look incredibly cool. After a few days, they let Camilla run around town with the carriage, and her stats quickly level up in the process. Then comes the day to set off for the capital, and Takumi notices that the Lion Fang will be joining them as an escort. Riel inquires about the creature pulling his carriage, and Heath clarifies that it's a drake horse. Just then, Godwin and Papek arrive as well. Papek is visibly excited to see the carriage and asks Takumi if he can take a peek inside. Takumi agrees, and upon inspection, Papek is astonished that Takumi built the carriage himself. Takumi confirms he did, prompting Papek to ask for all the details of how he managed such a feat. Overenthused, Papek exclaims that he'll pay handsomely for this work, but Godwin quickly intervenes to temper his enthusiasm. Papek apologizes, and Godwin remarks that the carriage is truly impressive. He states that he would be fortunate to own a carriage like this, and Takumi realizes that Godwin wants one made for him. Godwin boasts that he's willing to pay up to 100 platinum coins for it, and Takumi muses that such a price would be equivalent to 1 billion yen, surprised at the astronomical sum. They then begin their journey to the capital, and along the way, Godwin praises Takumi for his significant contributions to his domain. He proclaims that Takumi is set to play an even larger role and become renowned far and wide. His butler concurs, and Godwin adds that Takumi's exceptional talent attracts all sorts of attention, so he'll need protection from unscrupulous riffraff. However, Godwin admits he can only manage threats within the kingdom. When it comes to Sidonia or other nations, he has no idea what schemes they might be plotting, so vigilance is key. The scene then shifts to Sidonia, several months in the future, where we see Akane reading that the goddess Anat created mankind in her own image and then fashioned the beast men from wild creatures to serve humanity. Then she created the elves and dwarves, placing them beneath mankind in hierarchy. Akane then glances at a slave collar from the beast men displayed in her room and feels a deep sense of disgust. Meanwhile, Takumi and his entourage arrive at the capital of Bakalatos, and Takumi is relieved that they didn't encounter any monster trouble along the way. Riel mentions that they did, but thanks to Takumi's loyal slaves and pets, the creatures were wiped out in an instant, leaving them with little extra work. Papek then informs Takumi that he'd like to discuss something with him once they reach the inn. At the inn, Papek reveals to Takumi that he intends to gift the king a carriage similar to Takumi's own masterpiece. He explains that he has already spoken with Godwin about it, and they both agree that presenting such a carriage is the best way to demonstrate Takumi's exceptional talent to the king. With an audience scheduled with the monarch in 5 days, Papek expresses concern that building a carriage in such a short time would be challenging if done in Bolton. He asks Takumi to begin work as soon as they return there. However, Takumi insists that he can construct it here, noting that hauling a carriage back from Bolton would be too much effort. He adds that he can manage with the materials he currently has, but he will need adequate workspace, and Pepek promises to take care of that. Later, Takumi is seen discussing the new project with his slaves. He explains that Pepek has arranged for him to operate out of the garden of the Palom Company. Sophia chimes in, mentioning that she's heard of this company, a reputable slave-trading enterprise run by a man named Burton, and advises that Takumi should secure an assistant to help with the work. Maria then points out that he barely rested before this trip, and now he's diving back into production without a break. She cautions that this is reckless even for him, but Takumi assures them that he isn't truly tired. Sophia is still upbeat about the prospect of working with the Palom Company, suggests that Takumi should purchase another slave. Takumi initially declines, insisting that having just the two he already works with is sufficient. However, Sophia presses on, arguing that since neither of them can assist him with alchemy, an extra hand would be invaluable. In the end, Takumi relents and agrees to buy another slave, and they ask that the new recruit must be a woman, and he accepts this without further protest. The next day, Takumi arrives at the company and asks Burton for a slave who can assist him with his alchemy work. Burton remarks that he's heard Takumi is using alchemy to construct a carriage forged from mithril and adamantite, and he believes such a project requires someone with considerable magical aptitude. Meanwhile, in the company's garden, Maria and Sophia discover that they've lost sight of Maple. Maria, deeply worried because Maple had mentioned she wanted to explore the company's various buildings, urges Sophia to search for her. Sophia scores one of the buildings but finds no trace of Maple until she suddenly hears a scream. Rushing toward the sound, she finds Maple there with Riva trembling nearby. Although Maple tries to calm Riva, her efforts are insufficient, so Sophia steps in to help her up and gently soothe her. While assisting, Sophia notices an old book scattered on the floor. Riva explains that it's an encyclopedia on Arnold-style alchemy, a renowned primer for grasping the fundamentals of alchemy. Later, as Sophia returns to the garden, she runs into Takumi, who invites her to join him as he meets a prospective slave candidate. To their surprise, the candidate turns out to be none other than Riva. Burton formally introduces them, and Takumi explains the nature of his work. Eager to prove herself this time, Riva admits she's interested in alchemy, though she hesitates as she recalls the harsh words of her previous buyer, revealing that she still feels unsure about her abilities. Sophia then tells Takumi that Riva has been self-studying magic on her own here. Shigam saw Riva earlier, poring over an alchemy book. Sophia tries to recall the title of the book, and in unison, both Riva and Takumi manage to say its name, their shared excitement unmistakable. Burton and Sophia exchange knowing glances, remarking that these two are clearly kindred spirits. Takumi then draws an alchemic circle on a sheet of paper and asks Riva what its purpose is. She manages to identify it as a circle for spinning sweets, though it's slightly different from the one she's used to, leaving her uncertain. Overcome with doubt, she begins to cry, wondering what the hell her next step should be, and confesses that this isn't the sweet-spinning circle familiar in her hometown, fearing she might be rejected again. In that moment, Takumi extends his hand to her, warmly welcoming her into his party. Riva is taken aback as she initially couldn't decipher the alchemic circle that Takumi had shown her. However, Takumi reassures her by pointing out that she did correctly recognize it as the alchemic circle used for spinning sweets, so it's all right. He adds that it doesn't matter if the materials are different, and he praises her for grasping the concept at a glance. Curious, she asks if he truly intends to accept her as his apprentice, and when he confirms, she is overjoyed to finally have a master. They then formalize their contract, with Takumi promising to pay her daily wages from that point on. Riva requests that all her wages be sent directly to her family back home. Surprised, Takumi asks if she means every single coin, and she nods, explaining that her family is very poor. She recalls that she once managed to send them a little money by selling herself into slavery, but she's convinced those funds will soon run dry. She confides that she doesn't want her brother to continue living in poverty and wishes to ease her mother's burdens. Takumi warns her that if she sends all her wages home, she might remain a slave forever, yet Sophia interjects that he should honor her request. She assures him that by working for him, Riva will eventually develop enough skill to earn a living on her own, and that serving a kind master indefinitely isn't such a terrible fate. Takumi accepts this reasoning and later introduces Riva to the rest of the team, much to her delight. The scene then shifts to the present in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, where the Emperor learns that the Kingdom of Barcula still refuses to relinquish Takumi, despite having sent 3 missives by now. The Emperor considers that they must be taught a lesson, but Elizabeth intervenes, urging him to hold off on any rash actions until the heroes are summoned in a few months. Still reluctant to let the matter rest, the Emperor presses on, but Elizabeth advises him to harness the power of faith. She explains that they will spread word that someone is disrespecting the Church of Divine Light, a move sure to incite the anger of its faithful. Moreover, she warns that the Church of Divine Light Squadron will not stand idly by when such sacrilege occurs. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.